Welcome to Worldly Wellness Wednesdays, the semi-frequent look at wellness headlines around the internet and around the world. Just a few minutes of musings with Stephanie Rostolin. We take a quick tour of the world's view of wellness and what it might mean to the health-focused, wellness-centric pilgrim. Thanks for joining me. Last week on the podcast, we talked about what Europe is doing to make sure that they have their country of origin labeled on their honey, on their jams, and on their juices. And we talked about an article that was written by Cody Copeland for Business Insider back in 2020 on what the U.S. is doing. Now, this is back in 2020. I'd like to believe that things are better, but I did want to go a little deeper into that Business Insider article about fake honey problems, how it works, 2020. When we talked about it, we talked about how honey is one of the most faked foods in the world, and the U.S. government isn't doing anything about it. That was the title of the actual article. When we looked at that a little deeper and dived into that article, which is what I wanted to do today, the article covered the idea of honey launderers, about Honeygate from testing back in 2013 and the Honeygate scandal where the Justice Department went after honey launderers and really what was happening with honey. And I have to say, with Operation Honeygate being investigated, 2 companies were shipping adulterated honey into the United States from China. This is what last week's article was talking about trying to avoid, or at least if it was happening, that consumers were aware of it. He shared that manufacturers, and this is back in 2020, he shared manufacturers either dilute real honey with syrup derived from plants like high fructose corn syrup or beet syrup, or they can chemically modify the sugars in those syrups to make them look like real honey. Mr. Copeland shared that investigators were able to test the pollen trace where it originated from, yet isn't foolproof. Honey producers have figured out many ways to circumvent the tests. When we think about what could possibly be happening with our honey, and we realize that even from this article that honey is the 3rd most faked food that we are consuming or could possibly consume, and it's 3rd behind milk and olive oil. We talk about olive oil a lot. There's a lot of articles, there's a lot of study that's been done to see that olive oil has been faked. But we don't often talk about milk and how that's being faked. That's a whole nother can of worms that this article doesn't really cover, so I don't want to go deep into it. But again, the reason why I'm doing these little short podcasts is so that you can be aware as to what's happening in the world of health and nutrition in the news. What are companies, what are countries, what is our country doing to make sure that consumers are aware and to protect consumers who are purchasing? So as with before, what do we do with this issue? Buy local, meet your beekeeper, support your beekeeper, get to know them and how their operations work. Ultimately, with everything, stay local as much as you can, and you can have the most control over your food. Have a great day. Thanks for joining.